Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 68 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
Looking forward to the second iteration of the annual game challenge with a new twist this time. We're doing three, well, it turns out to be four games instead of two as of 2023.
Yeah, I made a whole lot of noise about not liking people telling me what to do, and so I decided to subject myself to more of it, and then we got even more than we were bargained for on account of there was a tie in the voting. Before we get to that, though, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the theme and why you picked it? I mean, we've discussed it in other videos, I'm sorry, in other podcasts, but for this, you know, what is foundational gaming to you? Why did you pick that theme?
I play mostly modern games. I wanted to see what's the roots, the structure, the origins of this discipline I played 80% of the games of. Where do we come from?
So let me ask you a question. Are you prepared to be shocked at how archaic some gameplay elements can be?
I have no doubt I am going to take it with the patience of a saint.
I press X to doubt on that one in particular. But I think it'll be interesting to see what games we end up choosing. You have a couple of stuff on your list. I have some stuff on mine. The way that this goes, for those who don't remember, is that we've picked a list of games. I told Kevin to pick five. He picked four, and then we have veto power over two out of the five games on the list. So Kevin will read out his list. I'll veto two of those games, and then he will pick a game out of, or up to two games I'm allowed to veto, and then he will pick a game out of the list that is allowed to say, okay, we're going to play this game. But first of all, we had a community pick in which we got suggestions from the community. We shortlisted these games and then posted a poll on Twitter um, with four of them and had you guys, the listeners, pick what that should be. And so the games that we put on the short list were as follows: Dragon Quest V, Ys Books 1 and 2, Suikoden 1, and Might and Magic 3. And I got to be honest, Kevin, I thought Dragon Quest V was going to win for sure. And I kind of wanted it to win because I don't really know anything about the Might and Magic series. And I've already played Ys Books 1 and 2. And I've already played Suikoden 1. So Dragon Quest V was the one that I was interested in playing that I hadn't already played before. And so why don't you tell the listeners what games won?
It was games that Colin did not play. Wait, let me go back a second. I'm getting some new updated information. Oh, it was games Colin has played before it. Indeed.
Yeah, good joke there, Kev. No, but it's the two games that I have already played. I've already played Ys Books 1 and 2. I've already played Suikoden 1. But they are the ones that they tied in the poll. And so we've decided that we're going to play both of them as opposed to trying to rig the election and choose the one that we wanted to play. Um, the order that we're going to play it though, we're going to start with the Ys games. We're going to start with Ys Books 1 and 2 because Suikoden is supposed to be re-released at some point. It was supposed to be re-released last year with an updated script, which would have been cool. But then it didn't happen. It got pushed back to 2024. So if we do it at the end of the year, there's the possibility that we'll get an updated script. Otherwise, the PlayStation 1 version plays perfectly fine. I don't think it's been ported to PS3, and like it might be available through PS5 through PS Now. I'm not really sure. Um, but that's one that, unless it gets re-released on modern platforms soon, we'll have to play the PlayStation 1 version. Kevin, do you know anything about either Ys Books 1 and 2 or Suikoden?
No, nothing.
All right, well, let me. Suikoden is pretty easy to sum up. It's a game and then turns into a series that's based off of a Chinese novel called, I think it's called The Water Dragon or something like that. I've owned it at one point, but I don't own it anymore. The book, I mean, I own Suikoden 1. It's a very famous and very beloved RPG in which you go around, you collect up to 108 characters, All of them can be in your party, I think, but only some of them should be. It's a relatively short game, about 20 hours. Suikoden 2 is much longer, but it's a story filled with political intrigue, some questions about, how do you fight against tyranny? It has some soft fantasy elements in it as well, and it's notable for being one of the few 2D RPGs that actually exist on the PlayStation 1 when the entire world was moving towards 3D gaming. So it's important for that. Ys books 1 and 2. Um, so the Ys series is really important because when we think of action RPGs, you really got to start with Ys. Hydlide might have come out before it, but Hydlide is bad. And Ys is not bad. Ys is actually fun to play. So that's an important thing. It has a fantastic soundtrack. It has for the time, an actual story. So that's nice. It was originally developed in 1988, I think. The first game, Ys Book 1, was released in the United States on the Sega Master System, which is the 8-bit version of the Sega consoles, the precursor to the Genesis. And then Ys Book 2 came out in a compilation pack with Ys Book 1 on the TurboGrafx CD. Do you have any idea what a TurboGrafx or a PC Engine is?
No.
So a lot of American gamers these days don't, because it basically lost in that console war. But basically, a TurboGrafx is it's the US name for the PC Engine. They're the same hardware, they just have different designs. And it is a 8-bit system with a 16-bit graphics unit. So it's a little bit more powerful than an NES. Logic systems still work the same way as an NES, but the graphics look better. It was also incredibly important because it had a CD add-on that you could buy it, attach your console to it, and it would allow it to play CD-based games, which means increased storage, which allows for things like voice acting, for animated cutscenes. Battery backup saves was also important for that. So a lot of the best RPGs on the TurboGrafx and on the PC Engine were actually released in CD form. And Ys Books 1 and 2 were released on CD form. They might have been the first ones. I'm not sure about that. But if you think about it, like this game was designed before, I believe before the first Legend of Zelda. If not, it's pretty contemporaneous. But in terms of technology, it's light years above and beyond it. Um, Technically, there are two games, but we're going to treat them as one. In total, it'll take about 20 hours to get through. I was playing while waiting for you to finish up with your painting stuff, and I'm already a third of the way through the first game. Really does not take that long, and it's pretty fast paced. But the combat, I think you will take a little bit to get used to because you basically just run into enemies until they die. There is strategy and there is depth to it, but it's going to take you a while to get there, so I'm expecting you to complain a lot. But I do find the game fun, I have to say, even on my second playthrough. The other version of the game you can get, we've talked a little bit about this. It's on Steam. With Ys Books 1 and 2 Chronicles. These are enhanced ports of the PSP remakes. These games have slightly more story. They have better graphics. What was important in my case when I first played it was that it was more stable. I tried to play the PC Engine original on my PC Engine CD, but either the motor or something on the disk drive is bad or my disk is bad, and the game was crashing all the time. So I ended up playing it on the Steam version, which was a lot of fun. Now I have a optical drive emulator, so I'm playing it on the original. It's up to you which one you want to do. The major difference that I can tell with the enhanced remake is that in the first game, the level caps at level 10, which you'll get to about halfway through the game, which makes the final dungeon purely skill based. Um, I'm not sure if the same, like I know that the level cap is not 10 in the originals because I'm level 12 right now. I don't know if there is a cap that I will hit before I hit up Darm Tower. I'll have to see. But yeah, whichever one is more convenient for you is the version that you should do. The person who suggested it, Alex, did specifically say he wanted us to play the original. By the original, he means the TurboGrafx version. I'm playing the TurboGrafx version, but Kevin, I think you should be allowed to pick whichever one you want. Do you have an idea of which version?
Probably Chronicles. It's on Steam. I don't want to be. buffing about with an emulator or whatever.
Sure. You probably will have to for Suikoden, or some of the other games that we play, but to start off right now, I think that's fine. Do you have any questions about these two games before we go into our own picks?
No, I want to be as blind as possible.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody who gave us nominations and suggestions. I want to thank everybody for voting. It's kind of cool to be able to say we have a community that cares enough to give us nominations and have opinions as to what we should play. And so I hope that when we get to these games, that you'll enjoy our content about them.
Yeah, exactly.
Kevin, why don't you go through your list and, and tell me why you picked these games?
Okay, so I have a confession to make. I forgot I'd be challenging you, so I was looking at foundational games I think would be good for me to play
Hmm.
for early RPGs. And looking on internet resources, I saw Chrono Trigger, US Final Fantasy 3, which is really Final Fantasy 6, Ultima 7, Dragon Quest 3. Three of these are JRPGs. Ultima 7 is, I believe, a CRPG, um, and important for Western development of games. So I wanted a mix of that, of, mostly JRPG, but also one CRPG in the mix, to see what kind of genealogical developmental differences there are. One is an early installment of a very famous franchise, Final Fantasy. Others are midway point or later games. Ultima 7, the first one was the early 80s. One was the first installment, Chrono Trigger, from the mid-ish 90s or a bit later. So there's chronological diversity, geographic or intellectual tradition, Western, Japanese. Are they early in installments? Are they, say, famous ongoing installments? And so just a diversity of early games, essentially.
So I'm going to whip out my veto pen and veto Ultima 7. Uh,
Okay,
for a
why?
for a couple of reasons. The first is that the last time that you suggested we played a Western RPG, it was Planescape Torment, and everybody says that that game was fun and is not fun, and I want to have fun. And I've got to be honest, man, I've been in this JRPG scene a long time. I've been in the RPG scene a long time, and I never hear anybody say, "Oh yeah, let's go play the Ultimate games." Um, Now, granted, Ultima 3, 4, and 5. No, was it 4, 5, and 6? Some Ultima trilogy was suggested by somebody who also nominated the Might and one of the Might and Magic trilogies. So some people like these games, but they're not something that has a huge reputation or that I have a whole lot of awareness of. Whereas the rest of the games that you have suggested are known quantities. And so I know that if any of these three are picked, I will have a fun time. So um, I veto Ultima 7. I've never played Dragon Quest 3. The only Dragon Quest game that I've played is Dragon Quest 1. I've been intimidated by Dragon Quest 2, so I haven't started on that one. Dragon Quest 3 I do hear is pretty good. Dragon Quest 4 and Dragon Quest 5 are also excellent games. So I will be open to playing Dragon Quest 3. That would be a new experience for me. I have played both Final Fantasy 6 and Chrono Trigger. These are excellent games. Whether any of them get picked for this challenge or not, you should play them definitely. And both Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy 6 are available through a different couple of different ways on Steam. So
Okay, so
that's
I know what I'm going to pick then.
okay. So what are you going to pick?
Dragon Quest 3. The community challenges games you've already played, so I thought I'll give you one you have not.
Well, see, I kind of knew that you were going to suggest games that I had already played. So my list is filled with games that I've never played. So as to to make sure that actually there's one exception to that, but so as to make sure that there would be at least one new game for me. Um, but so you're decided on Dragon Quest 3.
Yes.
Do you have any idea of what versions there are for it?
I'm going to play the fun one.
That doesn't narrow it down. Like expound. What does this mean?
Okay, you can play the not fun one. That
Well,
sounds
no,
fine.
man, you need platforms, man. What platform?
The NES, it's on the Switch, the 3DS, the PS4, Android, iOS, Game Boy Color, Super Famicom, and Wii.
All right, so let me break it down for you. The NES version is the original version. We got that. It was called Dragon Warrior 3. It was also released on the Famicom as Dragon Quest 3. The Wii version would be the same thing as that because it was probably released on the Virtual Console. The Super Famicom port almost certainly has an English translation that will have improved some gameplay mechanics and graphics from the original while still being faithful. I believe also that that version is what got ported to the Game Boy Color in English. Whereas the PS4, Switch, and mobile versions, they're all the same. They are considered to be easier than the original versions. I personally hate the graphical style on them, but some people seem to like them. They are definitely less grindy from what I understand. So if you're looking for that, then yes, you would want the modern versions, but I'm probably going to do either the NES version or the Super Famicom version.
And I want to say another reason why I picked the game, reading
Yeah.
about it. It sold over 1 million copies on day one in the late 1980s in Japan, which is an astronomical amount, and led to the arrest for truancy by students of almost 300 people.
Yeah, I think these like the urban legend is that in Japan they just close down school whenever a Dragon Quest comes out because people are going to play skip school to play it anyway.
So, with that kind of background, 300 people getting arrested for skipping school to go buy the game and play it, how could I not?
Fair enough. Well, I'm looking forward to playing Dragon Quest 3. This is a series that I've wanted to get more into, but I've been intimidated by Dragon Quest 2, so I haven't been able to move on. But this will be a good impetus to make me. Shall we go on to my list?
Yeah. What games did you pick and why? Because what do you think I would get out of them? Or is there an ethos that guided your selections, or is it more game by game individually?
So, again, to reiterate my initial methodology, with one exception, this list is a bunch of classical slash foundational to some extent games, JRPGs that I've always wanted to play. And so I figured that Kevin would also benefit from playing them. Each of them have different reasons for being on the list. So I'll go through them and then Kevin, you can deploy your veto and then I will decide what to do. So the first item on this list is Lunar, the Silver Star, also known by the PS1 title Lunar Silver Star Story Complete. This is a relatively early, I think it came out in 1992 on the Sega CD, which is a CD attachment for the Genesis, in the same way that the PC Engine CD is a CD attachment for the PC Engine. And this game is notable because it's being released to pretty critical and popular acclaim, both in Japan and in the West, at a time in which JRPGs are not very popular in the West. It has interesting voice acting. It's supposed to have a combat system that is, I don't want to say reminiscent of, but seems to have influenced the Trails combat system. This is by hearsay. I've not played the game, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that it takes like spatiality in mind. So that's interesting. But its main claim to fame is not even of the game itself, but rather the localization process behind it. There's a company that was active in the early 90s called Working Designs. And their modus operandi was to find these kind of obscure JRPGs that were popular in Japan that had no chance of being picked up by a major publisher in the States or a major localization thing in the States. And then they would put forth the energy to translate them and release them. kind of like how NIS America and Xseed operate today, but this is way earlier days in which JRPGs are not as lucrative as they are now. They are kind of infamous for both positive and negative reasons. Their translations, I hesitate to use the word translation. By reputation, it is far more of a localization than a strict translation, because they insert a lot of like early 90s American humor uh, in in a context in which obviously the Japanese is not making these similar kinds of jokes, which makes them an interesting relic of their time. It's a good way to think about localization principles and translation principles. It's also a good way to go back to 1992 to 1994 and see, oh yeah, we used to think these kinds of jokes were funny, and then we can see what stacks up and what doesn't stack up. The other reason why I bring it up, and the negative reasons why Working Designs is famous is that they also change a lot of the gameplay elements to make the games arbitrarily harder. Um, to the point where there are de-working designed hacks out there that keep the translation but change the gameplay back to the Japanese original to make them easier. To be honest, if I was to play Lunar, I would probably do a de-working designs patch on it. But it's kind of interesting to look at how these games really are. The American versions are their own game because of those changes that are similar to and inspired by the original, but are not the same as the original. This game in particular is also really influential for older YouTube creators that have inspired me to get into retro gaming. Specifically, I'm thinking about the channel My Life in Gaming that kind of showed me how to have a retro setup in my own house, which I do now. So I've always been interested in playing this game. I've owned it on the PlayStation 1 for years. And so I keep meaning to get to it. I figured I'd throw it into the ring now uh, to see if it would happen this year. The next game is the actual Final Fantasy 3, not Final Fantasy 6, but the legitimate third entry in the Final Fantasy series. And the reason why I picked this, I kept going back and forth between this one and Final Fantasy 5 because both of them have job systems. And by job systems, I mean the ability for a character to change their class at will. I think Dragon Quest has a similar feature. I think in Dragon Quest 3, I'm not quite sure. But this is one of the first games that really solidifies class changing as a system in RPGs. And Final Fantasy 3 itself, through that, has a huge influence on the rest of the series and on JRPGs as a whole. One thing I do want to note about this is that it was not released in the United States for a long time. We had to wait until the Nintendo DS and the PSP generation to actually get a port of it, and it was a 3D remake of the game. We have never gotten the original. There is a fan translation of the original, and it's been remade through the Pixel Remastered collection, which you can get on Steam and modern platforms. I ultimately picked Final Fantasy 3 over Final Fantasy 5 because I've already played Final Fantasy 5, and I've never actually played Final Fantasy 3 all that much. It's one of the few blind spots I have in that series. So that's why I put it on the list. Dragon Quest 5 is the next one because I've heard that it's the best of the classic Dragon Quest games. It has a monster catching system that is similar to it, and basically Pokemon ripped it off. And Pokemon is one of my favorite series of all time. My first video game ever was Pokemon Red. So seeing where it got a lot of its core concepts from will be very interesting. And Dragon Quest V, it's universally acclaimed. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to win the community pick, but it didn't, so it's on my list. And then the next one is Secret of Mana, which is a beloved Super Nintendo action RPG that I've been meaning to play for a long time. Um, if we were to play this, I would highly recommend playing the Super Nintendo original, as the modern remake sucks ass from what I've seen. But a port of the SNES original is available on Switch, so you could get it pretty easily that way. And also, apparently, the English translation is bad, so fans have retranslated it in 2018, which is probably how I would play it if this was picked. But it's interesting because it's one of the first RPGs to my mind that has like multiple party members fighting on the screen at the same time. I think as well you can like play multiplayer on it that way. It's just a game that always comes up in like classic RPG conversations, so I wanted to throw that out there. The last game is one that I've actually played, but because a remake of it just came out, and because it's so good, and I would not mind playing it again, and I think it's actually very influential in ways that people don't talk about. The last one is Super Mario RPG. To my knowledge, this is the first RPG that uses an active time button press system where when your like punch hits, if you press the A button, you get extra damage. If somebody attacks you and you hit the A button at the right time, you take less damage. It's a simple concept, but it has influenced the battle systems of so many games throughout ever since it's been released. That I felt if we're talking foundational games, this is one that has way more of an influence than people give it credit for. It might be that another game has invented the system before it, but I don't know of it. So if anybody knows, then do let me know. The Super Nintendo original holds up, especially if you have a CRT, which is designed for, or if you can look past some graphical stuff. Otherwise, they just remade the game for the Nintendo Switch, which is probably how I'll play it because I've already played the original. So Kevin, before you whip out your veto pen, do you have any questions on these five games?
No, I think that's pretty thorough, pretty good overviews. I know what I'll be getting into for whichever one is selected.
All right, then what are you going to veto? You have up to two.
I'm gonna veto Dragon Quest. I don't want to have our games be the same series. And then I don't think I'm gonna veto anything else.
You're not going to veto anything else. Okay. It's funny because I once you had picked Dragon Quest 3, I already mentally discounted Dragon Quest 5 as my pick because I agree with you. So that was a wasted veto. Um, all right. Because I care about your JRPG um education, and because I find that this year I played a lot of action games and I want to play more turn-based games, I'm going to pick Final Fantasy 3. I think that if you're going to go foundational JRPG education, the way that we've set it up, that you play an Ys game, that you play a Dragon Quest game, that you play a Final Fantasy game, this is the trifecta of classic foundational JRPG. So plus I'm excited to play it. There are a couple of versions of it. I'm probably going to play the Pixel remaster or the original with a fan translation. I have not decided yet. For you, it's probably going to be easier to get the Pixel remaster on Steam or on the
Yeah,
Switch.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but as you say, you wanted to go in blind, so I won't tell you anything more than that. Let's tell the listeners quickly the schedule, or at least the order. So we're going to start off with Ease Books 1 and 2. We want to make sure that we do the community pick first, or at least one of the community picks first, to show that we value your willingness to contribute and to make sure that that gets done, before things get too busy again and then we stop making content for 6 months or whatever. Like that, we will get Ease done. In fact, I was playing it right before this episode started to record. Um, After that, we want to play Kevin's pick because I took a year to play his pick last time, so he deserves to go first. Then we'll play my pick. Then we'll play Final Fantasy 3. And then after that, we'll finish up the year with Suikoden, which hopefully will give Capcom enough time to get their remakes out the door.
We have a quarter about per game to get it through. We will get the community picks, I promise, on behalf of Colin, also out in timely manners. Cannot promise about the other two games we are playing, but we will not tarry, not dilly, not dally for the games you all selected and voted on.
Now, we're going to get them all done. I mean, Suikoden is the last game, so we have to clear my game and your game before that. But, I mean, we're starting off with these. I don't know when you're going to start playing it, but I just beat Crisis Core this morning, so now I have no excuse not to play Ease Books 1 and 2.
And I have a new standing desk. I can, walk on the treadmill while playing computer games or what say you. So now I can't have any excuse either. Just can't say, oh, I got to go work out. Because guess what? I can work out and destroy my brain's thought processes at the same time.
All right. I mean, I think this is a shorter episode, which thank God, because I have to edit it right after we record it. And
And
then
I have to go to the hardware store.
yes, you do, because you put a hole in your wall.
But you know what? There's a hole in my heart for JRPGs and RPGs in general, and that's going to be filled not with spackle and plaster, but by playing really important early games that influence the games we play today, how we talk about games, what we take for granted, and I really hope we see some stuff that did not get picked up. Like we'll see roots of tropes, mechanics, and so forth that we still use today. But I really hope that we can see this was cool. I wonder why it didn't make the cut in future decades.
I'm thinking of one game in particular, the Final Fantasy II. If you want to see cool ideas that have not been used again because they were implemented so fucking poorly, play Final Fantasy II. And not the US Final Fantasy II, the real Final Fantasy II.
I don't have much more to say. I'm really looking forward to blazing entirely new ground for me. Nothing on any of these lists, of the community picks, of my list, of Colin's list, none of the 13, 14, 15 games I've never played. A lot of them I've never heard of for today. So eyes blind, head empty, just vibes. Looking forward to it.
Me too. Why don't you take us out?
Next week is the finale of Trails from Zero. That was a great episode to record. I can't wait for you to hear our ramblings and especially my thoughts on what went down. TLDR, Dieter is super sus. Till next time, I'm Kevin. That's Colin.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.